Hey everyone, welcome to the Rotowire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Friday morning DFS version. As always, I am Scott Jenstad joining you this morning. We're sponsored by WinBet. We appreciate that. We have a new partner starting today, Ryan Belongia, who's a big DFS player, writes about DFS for the Rotowire site. So happy to have him aboard here. As we talked about last week, Andrew Laird has actually moved on to a different job. You can find out about that on Twitter if you want to. Wish Andrew the best. Obviously, done this for him with him for a bunch of years, and look forward to doing it with Ryan now. Ryan, good to meet you. Good to have you here. Why don't you give everybody a 30 to 60 second intro on what you do for the site, how you fit in this DFS world, what you're doing here.
Sure. Yeah. Like you said, we're going to miss Andrew a lot. He was great on all these podcasts. Hopefully I can do a decent job filling in for him. A lot of you guys might know me from the soccer podcast. If you're into that, I write the soccer articles at Rotowire. I also write the Sunday DraftKings article and some of the Showdown articles too. I play all the DFS sports, well, almost all of them, but a lot of NFL. Just one common question that I get, and it's probably going to be important for what we talk about, and a question that I hear a lot of other people get on podcasts is, what tournaments do I play, or what tournaments am I going to be talking about, or what is my analysis based off of? Well, I play cash in NFL, a lot of cash, all of the single entry double ups from $5 up to $250. And then I play the single entry GPPs and the 3 max GPPs, all the way from $3 up to $200. So I don't play the Millie Maker or the huge field tournaments like the Slant or the Mini Max, or sometimes I play the 3 max, but not a lot. So what that means, a lot of times I'll play more. You can play more of the chalky guys in the single entry tournaments that I play with a couple leverage guys and a couple, single digit guys in the single digits in terms of ownership. If I was to play those bigger tournaments, that's where you really got to start fading the chalk and going way off the board. We see the winners in those tournaments have multiple players, around 5% ownership every week. So if you hear me talking and you think, it's too chalky or I'm not going off the board enough, it's just, those are the tournaments that I play. So
yeah, and that's good to know. And there's obviously way different ways to practice. Some people play cash, some people play only the big tournaments. Some people play those kind of medium things. So it's good to know. And we'll kind of hit players for all those different tournaments and all those different cash games as we go along, as always. So we'll happy to have you aboard. Look forward to doing it. It's good to have someone with a lot of good DFS experience, both for me and for all the listeners. So I can always I always look forward to learning from people to play a lot too. So let's jump into the week 6 slate. It's our first short slate of the year. We've got 4 teams that are on bye, so 2 less games there. Plus we have a London game. So we're down to 10 games on the main slate that you and I will be discussing. 7 early, 3 late. Our 4 primetime games, which we won't talk about. We had Philly and Tampa Bay last night. Seattle and Pittsburgh, which sounds great, but kind of a gross game now. That was a game that sounded really good a month ago. Buffalo and Tennessee are Monday night, and then Miami and Jacksonville are the London game. We have the 49ers, the Falcons, the Saints, and the Jets on a bye. On a shorter slate, does that affect how you build it all? When we go from 13 games to 10 games, obviously that's 6 less teams we're talking about. How does that impact you at all, kind of off the top before we get to talking about players?
Yeah, normally it would. You'd expect some of the chalkier spots to be even more popular. Yeah. And I think we have a couple spots like that this week. But to be honest, there still ends up being spots like that on 13 game slates. I mean, people tend to gravitate towards the same things most weeks, at least, a few of the same spots, a few of the same games. So it still just all comes down to getting leverage in certain spots. I mean, you can still play chalky guys. It's really not that much different, if a guy's 30% owned or 40% owned because it's a shorter slate, or 20 to 30. I mean, yeah, those are small differences, but if you're building lineups that have differential in other places, it still doesn't matter. So I'm not looking at it too differently, but yeah, there are less spots than usual, so I think people will gravitate towards some of the same games.
Yeah, it's a weird week where the Monday night game being on Monday and the players doing really well and the price is not adjusting because the pricing comes out for the game really affects this week. We have like 4 guys in that Monday night game from last week that I think will be pretty popular this week. But let's take a look at some of the games we got this week. Look at the high totals first. We have we have 3 games that are over 50 this week, 3 games that are under 45, and then a few in the middle. Kansas City and Washington, obviously we always have the Chiefs in this high range. Chiefs games are averaging 63.5 points per game combined in the totals. That's mostly because the Chiefs have given up 30 points in 4 straight games, and obviously the Chiefs offense is really good. So we've seen a lot of fireworks in Chiefs games. Washington games too, like they're at like the 4th highest total in games. I mean, their defense, which was vaunted before the year, has been really, really bad. So that game is 54.5. The Chargers in Baltimore, big matchup here between young stud quarterbacks, between Justin Herbert and Lamar Jackson, 52.5 in that game. Dallas and New England, a lot of that is based on Dallas's offense. That's 50.5. Any of these top games, you're like, oh my gosh, that's the game I want to attack and go heavy on and stack like crazy. Any 3 games really jump out to you like that's the one I want?
Yeah, definitely. That Chiefs game is hard to avoid. It looks great on both sides. Like you said, the Chiefs have given up 30 in 4 straight games, and the game they gave up 29.
Right.
And then, Edwards-Helaire being out, you'd think we'll have them throwing the ball a little bit more. And the fact that they're 2-3 too, like this is just a spot where you feel like they're going to try to score and keep scoring the whole game. I mean, they need to win and they need to be sort of ruthless about it. And yeah, they've been bad defensively too. So those guys on Washington are cheap with the exception of McLaurin, but I like that whole game. I'm going to have a lot of exposure to that game. It'll be popular, but rightfully so. It just, like you said, 54.5 total. Chiefs games have been going over 60. Kind of think this game goes over that total. Yeah, I mean, it looks great. And then, like, specifically, we'll get into players later, but Kelsey's just way too cheap.
Yeah, I was surprised by his price. He's 7,000 on DraftKings even. I was surprised he was that cheap.
It's very surprising because he had been over 8K in all 4 of the other Sunday slates that he was on. And like, it's even a better spot for him with Edwards-Helaire being out and Tyreek Hill maybe being a little banged up. Like, that should be a few more targets to Kelsey. So yeah, it's all going in the right direction for him. And yeah, I love that Chargers Baltimore game too. Like you mentioned at the start, which I think was a really good point, that Baltimore game being on Monday night, the prices didn't adjust since they were already out. So I think like Mark Andrews is definitely too cheap. Marquise Brown is probably a bit too cheap too. And that game has the 2nd highest total. Herbert's been amazing. Eckler's been amazing. Mike Williams has been amazing. Keenan Allen is cheap. So, I mean, that game looks great. Yeah, both those games look great. And I'm like those are games for those big tournaments like the Millie Maker that you could fade. Like, it makes sense to fade in those huge tournaments. But I'm going to be playing those games for sure.
Yeah, I think I'm there with you. Baltimore, and you talked about Marquise and Mark Andrews, but I mean, Lamar Jackson's $900 cheaper than Pat Mahomes. So there's a big drop off between the two of them when you kind of start at the top of quarterback. Lamar obviously went crazy on Monday night. That didn't get factored in. Low totals, we'll go hit these quick, but we've got Houston and Indy at 43.5. Pretty gross game overall there. However, Jonathan Taylor's really cheap there, and Houston's run defense is bad, and Jonathan Taylor went off on Monday night, the 4th guy that I was talking about that is really underpriced because they didn't have a chance to adjust for Monday. Green Bay and Chicago we think of as a fun game, but that total is only 44. A lot of that has just been the Chicago offense is struggling right now. And then Las Vegas and Denver, I think it's 44.5. Another game where, we expect, maybe a little lower than I thought, but, Denver defense is really good. Denver's missing a lot of guys. Las Vegas is sputtering a little bit the last couple of weeks. Obviously, John Gruden out there, so who knows what their offense is going to look like, how much they've practiced, what's going on there. So that game's under 45 also. We have a couple of games in the middle. Are there any other games that before we jump into players that you're really looking to stack? I know that the Arizona-Cleveland game interests some people, but is there any other games that maybe that aren't over 50? Like, I think this is going to go a little higher than most people think.
Yeah, like a sneakier game. I don't mind the Cincinnati-Detroit matchup.
Yeah, that's an interesting one too. I like that. I think that's the Cincinnati stack is actually turning out to be one of my favorite ones too.
Yeah, I like the Cincinnati stack. They're banged up at running back. They should be passing. They've sort of they've opened up the offense a bit more in the past 2 weeks. And then Detroit has some guys you can run it back with, like DeAndre Swift. I really like, and I like him too because he's not really dependent on a game script. He's good from behind. He's good when they're up. He'll get carries. He'll catch passes either way. And Detroit, they're pretty banged up at wide receiver now with Quintez Cephas out and Williams still out. So I think I'm not sure it's his first name. This St. Brown guy looks like pretty good value as a run back too.
Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's a lot of target. Yeah, a lot of targets last couple of weeks. So I do like that one too. So let's get into players. We usually start at the top with guys we think are going to be highly rostered, popular in cash games, kind of optimal. So first, a note from our exclusive sponsors at WynnBET. There's one thing we appreciate here at Rotowire: it's making good decisions, and even more so, it's making the right decision. Listen up! I have an incredible offer for you with Rotowire's newest partner, WynnBET, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WynnBET is now the exclusive partner for Rotowire's Fantasy Podcast. WynnBET brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, Robins, live betting, and so much more, all at your fingertips. Do you want to break from sports betting? Head into WynnBET's digital casino and take a spin on roulette, double down in blackjack, slam the slots, or try your hand at baccarat. WynnBET is currently available in 6 states: Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, Virginia, all while rapidly expanding. At WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. WynnBET is currently offering all Rotowire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download WynnBET now. That's WYNNBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner for Rotowire's Fantasy Podcast. So we kind of spoiled a little bit. I do think that Lamar Jackson, it's only $7,400 DraftKings, $900 less than Mahomes, is going to be very popular. I think that the other quarterback in the Mahomes games, Taylor Heineke at $5,800, is also going to be popular. Where do you think we're looking at? We kind of get quarterback rostership. Are you thinking we're looking at Mahomes, Lamar, and Heineke as your 3 top guys?
Yeah. So for cash games specifically, I agree. I think it's really hard to avoid Lamar. He seems a bit too cheap, like you said. I'm definitely going to play Lamar in cash games. I think he's a great tournament play too, obviously. And then, Heineke too. I talked with a couple friends that might be playing cheaper quarterbacks in cash. And I think you can go to Heineke. And I also think you can go to Carson Wentz at $5,400. I know it's a low total, but he doesn't need to do much at that price tag. It's just a really good matchup. They're 10-point favorites. I love Mahomes for tournaments, but for cash, I think you just go with Jackson. If you want to pay down, you can. Heineke and Wentz are okay, but I think that's the pool for cash games.
Yeah, I mean, and Lamar had it was 37 to 43 for 442 against Indy. Also ran the ball 14 times. Like, it was just a huge game. That has the potential to be back and forth. You could see him and Herbert getting into a shootout. The Ravens are more reliant on the passing game this year, I think, which is the key part of this. Like, they have some running backs that are injured. I don't think they fully trust any of their guys to hand the ball off like they did last couple of years. I mean, Lamar had 37 and 43 pass attempts last couple of weeks, which is, you just don't see that from Lamar. Last week was the first time he had more than one TD pass, which is kind of crazy. Like, you think about all those Marquise Brown plays, the drops and all that a couple of weeks. So he probably should have had more, but he's only rushed for a touchdown in week 2. So, like, the touchdown stuff had not been there until last week. And obviously it blew up. But, I mean, Lamar's floor is just so big with the rush yards. It's hard to get away from him at that price.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, they're sort of morphing into more of a passing team with the lack of a running game. And Lamar looks better than he used to throwing the ball, too. He throws a really nice deep ball, and they should have to be passing in that game. It should be competitive. And, of course, we always play him for the rushing upside. I mean, still amazing running the ball and just – he should be about 8K in this spot, you'd think. So it's just he's got a lot going for him. I think it's pretty easy just plug him in cash games.
And I think what people will notice is they'll flip on. They'll be like, oh, I want either Mahomes or Jackson. And then you're like, they're $900 difference. I think that'll really affect people as you kind of, the mindset as you flip through there. But talk to me about Tyler Heineke real quick. We mentioned him real at the top, but $5,800, I think, is the reason everybody's playing him. That plus the fact they're playing the Chiefs, price, game script, matchup, high total, should be throwing the ball the whole second half. The Chiefs, we mentioned, have allowed 30-plus points in 4 straight games. You point out well that the 29 was the other one, so 30 is an arbitrary point there. So they've given up a lot of points. He was legit bad last week against the Saints. Don't get me wrong. He was 20 of 41, 248 yards, no touchdowns, 2 picks. But prior to that, he had back-to-back 3 touchdown games. They should have to throw a lot. The Chiefs are allowing 9.3 yards per attempt. Like, they're a mess on defense right now. They've allowed 280-plus yards passing each of the last 3, 9 touchdowns passing the last 3 games. Like, this lines up so well on paper, but I get it. It's Tyler Heineke. So people are a little hesitant there, but I think the price kind of makes him really playable this week.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said. He was bad last week. It is Heineke. It's not a guy that you're comfortable rostering, but this matchup is much better. We've talked about how the Chiefs have just given up tons of points. Washington's almost certainly going to be playing from behind. He's going to be throwing the ball around. And he runs the ball a bit too. I see over 40 yards rushing in his past 2 games. He's a good scrambler. Yeah, and then the price tag, $5,800. So, I mean, you can roster him and then afford some of the expensive guys. Even like if you stack that Chiefs game, you can play Travis Kelce or Tyreek Hill or even both of them, but not with Mahomes. You can play it with Heineke because they have McLaurin, who's looks like a really good play in this game, and then Ricky Seals-Jones looks like really good value tight end.
I think there's going to be, as we get to tight end here in a second, there's going to be a lot of Ricky Seals-Jones clicks this week, I'm afraid.
Mm-hmm. We can talk about, we'll get into that later. But I'm on board with Heineke this week. Again, like you never really feel comfortable clicking his name, but it's just a great game script and matchup for him.
Yeah, so let's just jump down to Ricky Seals-Jones for a second. He is 3,000. Obviously, Logan Thomas is out. He's on the IR. He's out for a few weeks. Seals-Jones had 8 targets last week in the first game without Logan Thomas, and the price didn't move up at all. He's still minimum price 3,000. I think he's going to be crazy popular. There's a lot of people that are like picking him up last week. Like, I think I like him without Logan Thomas, blah, all that kind of stuff. And then with 8 targets, you got to think people are going to play him this week. The Chiefs have allowed 5 tight ends already over 50 yards this year, which is kind of crazy stat considering it's been 5 weeks in. Dawson Knox had that big play last week, 3 for 117 and a touchdown. Ricky Seals-Jones had 3 end zone targets last week too. Like, I think it's an interesting spot. If you're going to play tournaments, he's a really interesting fade just because everybody's going to play him at 3,000. The problem is if he does well at 3,000, like, you're behind the 8 ball already because that's so cheap if he does anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's one of those guys, like, I usually like to push back and try to fade these cheap tight ends that open up sometimes. But, yeah, Seals-Jones just looks really good for that price. They're like, Logan Thomas is out. They're banged up at receiver. They're banged up at running back. They're going to have to be passing. Like you said, he had those end zone targets last week. He had 2 back-to-back end zone targets in the first quarter. He had a 40-yard pass, I think, that was called back for a penalty. So he could have even had a better game. They're going to be passing all game, and it's $3K. So he doesn't really need to do much to get there. He can get there without a touchdown, with just catching a lot of balls, and he can get there if he doesn't catch balls if he gets in the end zone because he gets he's such a big red zone target for them. So I think, I'm leaning toward it. I think it's pretty good chalk if he's going to be popular. It lets you afford everything else, and he's playing in one of the best games to target. So I do like Seals-Jones.
I have a good way to get away from him, but I'm going to tease that. We'll get to it a little bit later. What about running backs? This is an interesting week this week because Christian McCaffrey missed practice yesterday. Sounds like he might not play. We don't know if he had a setback. We don't know what's going on, but we'll find out more information about that today. Derrick Henry, who has been kind of the obvious, first click in every tournament, every lineup for the last 3 weeks, had great matchups and getting the ball a ton. Historic amounts of usage. It's the highest amount of touches since 2003 or whatever it is. But they're both off the slate. Henry plays on Monday night. McCaffrey's probably not going to play. Dalvin Cook, we think is going to play, but who knows how we're going to get this. So, the top guys are not really, guys we're automatically clicking this week. So you kind of scroll down. When I was looking kind of who's going to be popular, Austin Eckler jumped out to me at 7,900. Jonathan Taylor really jumped out to me at 6,600. I think that's a price again that didn't adjust based on Monday night with an unbelievably good matchup against Houston right now. And Jonathan Taylor last couple of weeks, 16 for 103 2 weeks ago. Last week he had 169 total yards and 2 touchdowns. He had that long touchdown catch early in the game. Houston's allowing 4.7 yards per carry. As I was scrolling, I was like, I wonder where Jonathan Taylor's priced in the 7s. And I scrolled through the 7s. I'm like, did I miss him? He's 6,600. I just think that's the one that jumps out to me. I think he's going to be really popular.
Yeah, I think you're right. Jonathan Taylor jumps out to me too. It's a great matchup. Price is probably too cheap. Well, it is too cheap. And yeah, I think it makes sense for cash games too. Normally, Taylor hasn't been a guy I considered in cash games because hasn't been involved in the passing game, but he's caught 3 balls in back-to-back weeks, and like you mentioned, including that long one on Monday night. And yeah, it's a great matchup. They should be winning, and they should be, trying to close out the game in the second half. So yeah, Taylor makes a lot of sense for cash games. I think Darrell Henderson is in a pretty good spot too. Should be a good game script. They should be winning against the Giants. The Giants have been pretty bad against the run. Henderson, it's a good price tag, $6K, and he's got there every week. He catches passes too. So I think you can go there. Looking lower, I really like Darrell Williams in that KC game. I know his role.
There's a lot of cheap running backs. A lot of cheap running backs have opened up from a lot of injuries this week. We have a lot of guys in the 5s that are playable.
Yeah, like I'm interested to get your take on Khalil Herbert.
Yeah,
what do you think? When I was just for sure going to play Darrell Williams like all week, and then we get this Herbert news. He's 4,600. I've seen, projections that say he's going to be popular. I'm not sure how I feel about it. What do you think?
Yeah, it's tough, right? I looked at Darrell. I always call him Darrell. I looked at Darrell Williams also. There's a lot as we get into mid-range running backs here in a bit. We'll talk about those guys, but Herbert is just 4,600. I think that we talk a lot about are there any free squares this week? Is anybody's going to go automatically to? And I don't think Herbert's quite there, but David Montgomery's out. You mentioned Damian Williams out with the COVID. I mean, we don't know for sure he's not going to play, but I think highly likely. You get the COVID list that late in the week. I think he's probably going to be a pretty good chance he's not going to play. You look at Herbert. He played 34 snaps last week. He actually played more than I thought he was going to play. He was 18 for 75, pretty effective. He was a stud at Virginia Tech last year. Like his yards per touch led the country. He was like 8.2 or something yards per touch. He's been good on that this year so far too. Good game script. Like they're playing the Packers. They should be trailing. He can catch some passes too. So a little bit worried that if they get behind, maybe they don't run the ball. But I think he's kind of involved just based on they don't really have much else. He's a tough guy for me. I tend to struggle with. I've talked about Andrew for the years. I tend to struggle with these cheap running backs. Like they look so good, and then you flip them on, and you flip on the game, and he has 9 touches or something like that. It's just it's tough to. I sometimes don't time those guys very well. And it's been a spot that it's hard for me to get to. But 4,600 is the only guy there. Like if Damian Williams is playing, I wouldn't touch it. I wouldn't trust the 18 touches from last week. You'd like to think that with Justin Fields, they set up plays where that really helps him because Fields is running the ball as a threat, but they haven't really done that very much. But 4,600 is tough to get away from. I think I'm definitely going to have some. I don't know if I'm going to be all in, but I'm definitely going to have some Herbert this week.
Yeah, 4,600 is cheap. You're right. It doesn't take a lot to get there. What had me leaning with Williams is just I feel like he's got significantly higher touchdown equity just playing for the Chiefs, being in that. The Chiefs have the highest implied total. Back to the top quick. I kind of skimmed over that. Really like Eckler, obviously, and if McCaffrey's out, or even if McCaffrey's active, I have a hard time going there. Unless we hear something that he's going to get all of the work, because like coming off that injury for 8,800, you don't want McCaffrey to be in there for 60% of the snaps for 8,800. It makes it tough to get there. But if we heard some news that he was okay and going to get the majority of the work, then I would like McCaffrey because he might not be as popular with that questionable tag. But assuming he's out, I really like Eckler. He makes a lot of sense. opposite Lamar Jackson, because he catches a lot of passes. He's scoring a lot of touchdowns. He's just doing everything for them. Dalvin Cook, yeah, it's interesting to see him without an injury tag and practicing fully.
Yeah.
I don't love him. It's a tough matchup on the road against Carolina, and you think that Madison will probably still get some work too. Why I do like Dalvin is because he's cheaper than we normally see him, and because people aren't going to play him. So,
agreed.
He still does have a chance, to be the highest scoring running back on the slate. Not as good of a chance as usual, but it's a good gamble for tournaments. I don't know that I'll get there. I like these 6K running backs more, but I think you could.
I think it's a good way to look at it with Cook. I think people will definitely be gun shy, just thinking that maybe he sits one out of every 3 series, or they don't really push him as much as normal. But that's a spot where you get someone who's an absolute stud like Dalvin Cook, hits a couple big plays, and suddenly you get that pretty well. So, and just real quick before we get into some tournament stacks, receiver in kind of cash games, high percentage. I think we always talk about Davante Adams, Tyreek Hill. You mentioned he's 8,500. Adams is 9,000. Tyreek did not practice on Wednesday or Thursday, so that's one you really got to see if you're going to commit that money. Make sure that you think he's going to play. And it's kind of easy for people to just go $15 cheaper. Kelsey, Cooper Kupp off the huge Robert Woods game, still double-digit targets. He's 7,900. And then McLaurin is 7,100. We talked about the Chiefs watching him. I think a lot of people are going to play him just because everybody's going to want a piece of that game. He's really, really good. If you're going to play Heineke, I think a lot of people will play him just because it's kind of an easy way to go, and Heineke's cheap, so you can get to McLaurin pretty easily. Who do you think is the most rostered out of this top range at wide receiver?
Yeah, I think receiver is the toughest position in cash games this week because I think there's a lot of similar plays and not necessarily one that just jumps off the page. If I'm spending up, it's definitely going to be for Davante. It's not like the best matchup against the Bears. I'm not sure we care when it comes to Davante. It's just ridiculous. He's completely matchup proof at this point.
Yeah.
His salary is all the way up to 9K, but you can afford it with the cheap running backs. So I do like going to Adams. I think he'll be popular in cash and the most popular in that top range. If I'm going further down, there's some 6K guys in good spots. Keenan Allen has a nice price tag. I think he's a pretty good cash play, like still getting a lot of targets and in a matchup where they should be passing. And then that lower 6K range, there's a lot of guys there. Like I think you could go to Robert Woods. I think you could go to Marquise Brown, Brandon Cooks, Adam Thielen's really cheap. I would like Michael Pittman. I would like Michael Pittman a lot if I haven't checked yet, but I heard T.Y. Hilton might be back. Have you seen
the ghost of T.Y. Hilton?
Yeah, it'd just be like a slight downgrade to Pittman, just in terms of cash games. He practiced twice this week, and I guess he's gonna test it out pre-game, but it seems like he's trending towards playing. But yeah, if Tyreek Hill were to be out, I think Mecole Hardman is probably ends up the most popular, and he's a great cash play at that price. But yeah, I'm struggling at receiver this week because nothing is just like jumping out. Like we've had some sort of easy plays the last few weeks, but I think you can use almost any of these guys in that upper 5 to low 6K range. What do you think? I mean, is anyone like who stands out for you, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is kind of a little more tournament bells. I love Keenan Allen this week at 6,400. I just think that like the $1,700 difference between him and Mike Williams is absurd. Like I know Mike Williams has been awesome. Mike Williams was great last week. Mike Williams is questionable right now. I feel kind of like I did with Robert Woods that we're going to have to hit a Keenan Allen week. I actually like a Keenan Allen Justin Herbert stack. We're going to get to that in a second, but I do think that's really playable, and it's in a spot where Herbert might be the 4th or 5th most popular quarterback, which I really like. But I think Marquise Brown off the Monday night game, a lot of people are going to move right to him too. And you mentioned Mecole Hardman. I have him down in cheap receivers, but obviously he becomes a pretty highly owned cash guy if Tyreek Hill doesn't play. 4,200 and coming off 12 targets. Weirdly, for a guy who's that fast and that we always like, oh, big play, big play, big play. He didn't really do a lot with his targets. He was 9 for 76, I think, a lot of like kind of quick passes. But that's what the Chiefs do. Like, they don't like to throw the running backs. If they're going to get it out quick, it's going to be to Kelsey or to Hardman or to Hill. But yeah, I think if Tyreek doesn't play, you got to think everybody goes to Hardman really quick at 4,200.
Yep, absolutely.
We talked about Ricky Seals-Jones at tight end. We talked about Kelsey at tight end. I think those are the two. Plus with Mark Andrews, I think everybody's going to play one of those three in cash games. Like they just like a mid range, a top level, a cheap guy. Like it's easy to if whatever you're kind of finding your salary slot there. Those are the three that I think people will easily click to at that position.
Yeah, I don't remember a week with tight end plays like this, like you said, that are just in such good spots and all in different price ranges. Kelsey at the top, Andrews sort of in the middle, and then Seals-Jones at the bottom. And they're all great plays. They're all like good chalk this week. Too cheap. Andrews too cheap. Yeah, we've mentioned it already. So what it means is, and I didn't expect to be saying this year, this doesn't happen very often. It might be the only time this season, but in cash games, I absolutely think you can play double tight end. I'm actually leaning towards it. I think those three are such good plays. Yeah. And if you play Seals-Jones, you can just afford so much more. And then if you want to play Seals-Jones, you don't want to miss out on Kelsey or Andrews because one of them is smashing for sure. I mean, you got to think so. So, and you know that with the fact that there's not like an obvious or too many obvious receivers to play. It has me looking at double tight end this week. I think it's very in play.
Yeah, and I never do it either, but I was thinking about that too. I mean, you think of the Seals-Jones, like we love to play a $3,000 wide receiver who's getting targets and involved, and you're like, well, I don't think he's that much different. Like you just consider him a $3,000 wide receiver with 8 targets last week. In an offense that likes to use the tight end, especially in the red zone. I think you just kind of in your mind, if you're like worried about playing 2 tight ends, just consider him your kind of punt $3,000 receiver and then play a tight end. It works pretty well.
Absolutely. Think of him as a 3K wide receiver. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's jump into some tournament stacks. But first, a note from our sponsors at Thrive. Thrive is back for another season of fantasy football, and they're running huge guaranteed contests each week this NFL season. With Thrive Fantasy, you can eliminate the countless hours of research and focus on only the top-tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Sign up today and get a free 6-month Rotowire subscription. Here's how you claim that free Rotowire subscription. Number 1, you visit rotowire.com/thrive. Number 2, you deposit a minimum of $10 and receive a $100 deposit bonus up to $100. And finally, play in your first paid contest, receive a free 6-month Rotowire subscription. So, Ryan, we talked about we're going to jump into some quarterback receiver stacks. I kind of spoiled my first one a few minutes ago, but Justin Herbert with Keenan Allen, $6,400 on Allen, $7,300 on Herbert. I think that as people click on their DFS lineups week, I think it's so easy to just click Lamar instead of Herbert. They're the same price, but Lamar's off that big, huge game of Monday night, kind of fresh in everybody's mind. But Herbert was huge last week too. He was 398-4 against Cleveland, who we thought had a pretty good defense coming in. He was just dominant. The Ravens are 27th in the league. He gave up 8.3 YPA. I think Herbert's in a really good spot here. I think he's helped by the fact that people will go to Mahomes, Lamar, or down to Heineken. You mentioned Carson Wentz. Also, there's some cheap options there. I love Allen at $17 cheaper than Williams. I know he only has 1 touchdown, but he was still 6 for 75 last week. Still had 9 targets. 32 targets the last 3 weeks. He's really, really heavily involved. I feel like he's kind of due for a touchdown or 2 game. And Mike Williams is a little bit banged up this week too. So I really like going to Allen. It's easy to come back in this game too with a stack. You can come back with Hollywood Brown. You can come back with Mark Andrews. We talked about. I really like stacking this game. I think everybody will have pieces of this game. I'm hoping maybe people go more to Chiefs in Washington, but I like kind of going the Herbert stack to be a little different than Lamar.
Yeah, I love the Herbert stack. Chargers have been amazing this year, so has Herbert, and they could easily just win this game against the Ravens too. The Ravens have been inconsistent. They looked bad the first half of the Monday night game last week, and yeah, just with the difference in popularity too. Most people will go to Lamar at that price. Herbert will still be relatively popular, but less so. Yeah, I love going to Herbert and stacking him with Keenan Allen. I even think you could throw Jared Cook in there. really cheap tag at 3.2. And sometimes when there's going to be chalk like Seals Jones, you can get good leverage playing another guy in that same salary range. We've seen Jared Cook do it before. So I think you can go like bigger stacks than you can pair your QB with multiple wide receivers and there are multiple pass catchers in this game. Yeah, I love going to Herbert.
Yeah, and that's a really good point on Cook. I like that. If people always talk about, I want to fade the popular tight end. You find another guy in that range. I mean, that's the way to do it because everybody's going to scroll down. They're going to click Seals Jones. Nobody's going to click Jared Cook. I do like that idea a lot. The other stack I want to talk about, and then I'm going to hit you up for a couple of years. I really like the Cincy stack. You mentioned Cincy against Detroit. Joe Burrow is 6,300. Jamar Chase has jumped on the scene. He's 6,700. He was 6 for 159 and touchdown on 10 targets last week, 50 plus yards every week, over 65 yards in 405, touchdown in 405. His targets are up the last couple of weeks too. Like we talked, he was hitting big plays early, and now he's being heavily targeted and hitting big plays. He has 9 and 10 targets last 2 weeks. I think the not being able to catch the NFL football narrative is long in the past here. We talked about that in the preseason. But, Burrow, multiple touchdowns in all 5 games. He's quietly been pretty good fantasy-wise. He hasn't had a huge monster game yet, but, he's been really solid across the first 5 games of the year. The Lions are last in the NFL at 9.9 YPA. They haven't given up a ton of big games just because teams have been, ahead of them and haven't had to pass. So, you have to hope Detroit can hang in this game a little bit. So you're kind of betting on, maybe Detroit hitting a couple plays in the first half and maybe keep Burrow throwing the second half. But you mentioned, since running backs are banged up, Mixon, he's going to play, but who knows when to get from him. I think Burrow and Chase, and then you mentioned the comebacks with you go Hawkinson, you go St. Brown, you go DeAndre Swift. There are some choices there that work pretty well in a game that if Cincinnati scores a bunch of points, it works. So if I'm getting away from the big games, you kind of mentioned earlier, but I think Burrow, Chase, or you can go T. Higgins. He's 5,300 if you need to save some money. I like this as kind of a sneakier stack this week.
Yeah, I do too. I can always get behind playing Joe Burrow. I'm a big fan of his. He's been good this season. I think he has a big future. Yeah, pair him with Chase. They've had a great connection. Chase is a threat to score, multiple touchdowns with his big playability. And I think you can also use 2 wide receivers in that stack. I prefer, I know both Boyd and Higgins have decent salaries. I probably prefer Higgins, but I don't know. It's basically a toss up. And I like running it back with those Detroit guys. I think they will stay competitive at home. I mean, they seem to really play for this coach. Dan Campbell was kind of, he was the butt of some jokes in the preseason, but the guy's growing on me. And I like these coaches where, the players are going to play for him. It's like the opposite of the Urban Meyer situation a little bit.
Yeah.
This Amon-Ra St. Brown, definitely a lot of target. I mean, these guys are just okay plays on their own now that Cephas is out too. So when that's the case, makes the stacks look even better. So I like that call on the Burrow Cincinnati stack. Can't really believe I'm going to mention this, but for the bigger tournaments, the bigger large field tournaments, even somebody like Jared Goff is in play at 5,100. I mean, you only need like 20 points from a guy that's that cheap to win one of those tournaments. It's not really somewhere I'm going to go, but I figured I'd at least mention it.
Are there any better quarterback receiver stacks we haven't talked about that you think you are going to play with this weekend?
Yeah, I'm gonna take a chance on Wentz and the Colts.
Okay.
They finally looked pretty good last week, and the salary is cheap, and Jonathan Taylor is going to be very popular. So what if just all of Jonathan Taylor's touchdowns, go to Wentz in the passing game instead? It's very easy. I like Pittman. I think you can play Mo Alley Cox for 3,100, and I will take a shot on T.Y. Hilton if he's active, just because he's 4,100. If he was, 5K or whatever, no. But I mean, it doesn't take a lot at those prices.
And he's owned the Texans for a lot of years too. He always plays well against Houston. If you come back with someone in that game, do you come back with like a Brandon Cooks? Do you just not even bother with the Houston offense? What do you do if you play that stack?
Yeah, very good question. If Tyrod Taylor, I guess it doesn't look. I heard that he might play. I mean, if Tyrod Taylor was playing, then I'd come back with Cooks for sure because like I have confidence that he's going to catch balls and get a lot of targets.
Right.
Davis Mills, I don't know. Like in these spots, I don't think you need to run it back when you have like a cheap stack. And this cold stack is a cheap stack. So you can get there if they blow them out, 30-7 or something. You don't need anyone in Houston. You don't always have to run your stacks back in these type of games.
It's a good answer. I like the answer there because I always feel like I kind of try and force it, but there's times where like if I think these teams are like you said, going to score 7 points, like there's somebody else I can put my lineup that I think is going to do more than that. But before we get into some mid-range guys, I'm curious what your thoughts are. We talked about running backs a lot, but expensive receivers. We kind of talked about the Javonte, Tyreek, Cooper Kupp range, but do you like any of the guys in the 7,000s? Anybody I think these guys are going to be pretty low roster this week. Justin Jefferson's 8,000. I think he's so expensive that people will probably just go to Hill or Kupp. DeAndre Hopkins has been quiet. He's 700, did score last week. Doesn't have 10 targets yet in the game, but he's obviously DeAndre Hopkins. And then DJ Moore, coming off the quiet game. Everybody's loving DJ Moore. Finally had a quiet game. He's 5 for 42. Still had 7 targets. His first game under 75 yards. He's 7,300. And these guys that like in these 7,000s that maybe aren't in the right game this week or aren't being talked about this week that you really would like to get kind of maybe as a standalone as a receiver you really can go off this week.
Yeah. I'd like to make a case for some. I mean, just because of what you said, they're going to be sort of forgotten about. But yeah. I don't know. I'll go. We've talked about McLaurin. He's not going to be overlooked. I'll definitely go to McLaurin at 7-1. But I'm going to say no because I'll just go a little bit higher because I don't think people are going to play Mike Williams, and that's nearly as much as the other pieces in that game, because of his salary. Like you said, 1,700 more than Keenan Allen. Like people don't want to pay 81 for Mike Williams. I mean, in previous seasons, we didn't want to roster him for $5K. But so I think it's a good tournament play. Tyreek Hill, obviously, but maybe not so obvious because, he's missed practice and has that questionable tag. That's when I like to play guys too. When people are going to be off him for maybe they're worried about an injury and maybe, maybe he is a bit injured, but it's going to lessen his popularity. And, Tyreek Hill breaks slates often. We've seen him put up 40+ fantasy points twice this year. And I think they're just going to be throwing the ball all game. So yeah, I can't really do it in that high 7 range this week. You're right, though. It makes sense because they're not going to be popular, but I'm just going to pay all the way up or go down.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, you look at Tyreek, you talk about breaking slates, and like those Washington defense is crazy. Like we talked so much about, their front seven's so good, all this. They gave up 279 and 4 to Jameis Winston last week, 283 and 4 to Matt Ryan the week before that. Like I get it, in week 3, Josh Allen smoked him, but that's Josh Allen. But Matt Ryan and Jameis Winston smoking. There's something wrong with this defense. They've been awful. They're 31st in point per game to quarterbacks in fantasy. Obviously, the question mark is on Tyreek is the injury, but like I think he's a guy that can miss practice a couple of games. If he looks okay today and gets out there a little bit, I think he's pretty likely to play. But obviously, you check that on Sunday morning, make sure he's playing, make sure he's active, make sure he looks good in pregame, all that kind of the stuff that we hear on the pregame shows. But yeah, I wonder if people on Saturday are like, he's questionable, I'm not going to play him. I wonder if he's a little bit lower roster than we think, just based on the questionable tag. You mentioned that. That's probably a good time to get him in there. Yeah,
that's what happens. And then, like you said, like just to put a little bow on it, this Washington defense has allowed the most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, the most in the league, and they've given up the most receiving touchdowns in the league. Like you said, I think 31st against quarterbacks, and they're playing against arguably the best passing offense in football. Yeah. So I mean, like it's a great spot.
It is. Yeah, there's just no way around. I mean, there's options on both sides. It's just one of those games I think a lot of people are gonna have a lot of, and for good reason. Like, it's not like people are stacking this game for no good reason. It should be a fun game. I just hope that you got to hope that Washington can hang with them a little bit to make it a kind of a shootout in the second half rather than a 33-17 game where maybe the Chiefs sit on a little bit, but the Chiefs don't really have anybody to sit on it with. Like you mentioned, Darrell Williams, and we're going to talk about mid-range running backs right now. But first, a note from our sponsors at Yahoo DFS. The new NFL season is underway, and Yahoo's excited to kick off daily fantasy football. There'll be a ton of big prize contests throughout the season on Yahoo, including their multi-entry contest now being shark-free. To celebrate the beginning of football season and Yahoo Daily Fantasy becoming shark-free, Yahoo is giving all users the opportunity to get a free $10 in contest entry credit. Users can take advantage of this free $10 contest entry credit offer to join one of Yahoo's biggest contests. In addition to the free credit, Yahoo has the $1 million DFS football contest now live. The $1 million contest features $1 million in total prizes, including first place receiving $100,000 and an entry into the first ever Yahoo Fantasy Football Championship Live Finals event, which will occur at MGM National Harbor in Maryland this December. Play daily fantasy football on Yahoo this season. Visit sports.yahoo/dailyfantasy/welcome to claim that free $10 to get us started. Play on Yahoo DFS this year. It'll be a good time there. Mid-range running backs. One guy kind of just out of the mid-range, but we haven't talked about yet. I wanted to ask you about Zeke Elliott. Has looked like the old school Zeke the last couple of weeks. He's 7,100 at New England. Potentially a good game script. You got to think. I think Dallas is like 4 to 5 point favorites in this game. He has 95 plus rushing yards in 3 straight games, 5 touchdowns last 3 games. Alvin Kamara and Leonard Fournette each had 90 yards on New England. They haven't given up 100-yard running, but they have kind of gotten close to there. Where do you fall on Zeke this week? He's kind of in this like weird mid-range where it's kind of hard to get there. Jonathan Taylor's cheaper and in a better matchup. Where do you think you fall on Zeke this week?
Yeah, I can't argue against Zeke, but for whatever reason, I'm having a tough time. I've been having a tough time jumping on board because of just sort of how bad he was the last year and the emergence of Tony Pollard and Dallas's passing game. However, like you said, they're really committed to the run, and Zeke looks good. He looks good. He looks explosive. He's had some big plays. He's scoring touchdowns. So, yeah, I don't mind going there. Dallas has one of the higher implied totals on the slate. And like you said, it should be a good script where they're running the ball. I think, if he's not going to be popular, that's sort of what it comes down to, which I don't know. I mean, we'll wait to see how some of these injuries shake out. If you have, access to ownership projections, check them out. If he's going to be, if he's not going to be popular, I like taking a chance on Zeke. You're right. Everything sets up good for him here. I'm not sure if I'll get there, but I can't argue against it, I guess is the best answer.
So the Browns running backs are an interesting spot. They're both questionable right now. I think obviously either one becomes really, really popular and important if one of them sits. Like if Chubb doesn't play, Hunt at 6,200 is going to be popular. If Hunt doesn't play, Chubb at 7,200 goes way up. Chubb was big last week, 21 for 161 and touchdown. He has over 80 yards rushing each week. Like it's a great matchup because like Arizona has 4 wide receivers out the whole time. Cleveland runs the ball more than anybody. Like it's a really interesting dichotomy between these two teams. But Kareem Hunt's been over 60 yards rushing the last 3 weeks. He had 17 targets the last 3 weeks. Do you need one of them to sit to play the other? Where do you fall on the Browns running backs to be kind of as in general?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, like you said, if one of them sits, the other one is just a great play. Good enough to be played in cash games easily. And I would have a ton of exposure to whichever one started. Yeah. If they both play, I think they're okay for tournaments, mostly because people just don't like playing these Cleveland backs when they both play. But they always get there. And like you said, the spot against Arizona might go a little bit overlooked. Cleveland relies on these guys so much. And there's just this added thing of the fact that they're both sort of questionable and banged up. It does happen where one of them, feels something in the first quarter and the other one takes over. So stuff like that happens quite a bit. I think you can roster either one of them if they're both active. Chubb's been great. They've both been great. Yeah. So I'm on board this week for tournaments because I don't think people just don't do it when they're both active.
Yeah. As you will get, you will learn from doing this podcast with me. I am a huge Nick Chubb fan. He's one of my favorite running backs. I roster him a lot. I had him last week and he was really good, but it's frustrating. Like you get down to inside the 5 and you're like, oh, there's Kareem Hunt. You have to look at the helmet to see what the hair looks like to know who's in or the number. But it's just, you're like, oh, there's Hunt. And I mean, Hunt's really good. So I get it. But, they do run the ball enough where you can play them if they both play. But yeah, I think if one sits, the other becomes a play really quickly. On that same note, if Christian McCaffrey sits, I think they're kind of leaning towards that. Do you entertain Chuba Hubbard at 5,900 against the Vikings?
Yes. I was prepared to be off of him, but I can't ignore that last game. Rushed for over 100, 24 carries, and getting targets in the passing game again. 5 catches, 29 touches. Yeah, if he would get that again, it'd be one of the better plays on the slate. I wouldn't necessarily expect that again, but it's a little bit tougher matchup against Minnesota. But yes, if McCaffrey's out, I definitely have interest in Chubb. Yeah, I do. I was thinking about the other side of that game. Minnesota doesn't necessarily have people that I'd want to run it back with, but you don't need to stack your running backs. Like guys like Chubb can be played as one-offs. So yeah, I think that's a really good call. Some of these other guys like Henderson, Taylor, and Swift are going to be popular. They're the ones that people are talking about this week, and that makes Chubb, even better. And then I wanted to say when you were talking about Chubb, like I see that over 20 carries in 3 straight games. Like, it doesn't matter if Kareem Hunt's active. You can always play Chubb.
Yeah, I mean, the only issue is you got to kind of hit that big 20-yard or plus touchdown just because, Hunt does play in the goal line. But, I mean, he's good enough. He did last week. He had a 50-yard to 60-yard touchdown. Mm-hmm. What do you do with someone like we have Saquon Barkley's out this week? Devontae Booker had 19 touches last week and 2 touchdowns after Saquon left. But playing the Rams, 5,400, they priced him up a little bit with Barkley out. The Rams are allowing 4.3 yards per carry, but some of that is skewed. Like they give up a couple of big plays to Chase Edmonds. They've been pretty good against running backs. Other than that, do you entertain someone like Booker this week? It seems hard to get there with all the options we have in this range, but starting running back at 5,400, I guess we got to mention him. Yeah, no,
he's an important question this week. Like when I first opened the slate a few days ago, I was expecting to have some interest because I expected him to be, maybe 4,500 or something. But like you said, they priced him up, and the matchup is not good. But what makes him intriguing is that he might have a 3-down role, like just take over Barkley's role and just be out there all the time catching passes too. So I think he's okay. I do. Like you said, though, we like some guys below him and above him. Yep. Probably like those guys more than him. The matchup against the Rams isn't great, but you can see paths to Booker having a good game. So I don't mind it at all. But kind of like the other guys better. But I do think he's in play. He's interesting.
It's funny, like in some weeks, $5,400, starting running back would be like, oh my gosh, roll over that. But we've got 10 guys under 7,000 are playable. So it gets a weird week where we have injuries. We have kind of emerging guys. Last running back I want to ask you about, Javonte Williams is 5,000. I have a hard time playing someone who is just splitting carries, and it's still splitting carries with Melvin Gordon. But you see all these charts on Twitter and stuff that Javonte Williams is eluding tackles. He's really explosive, really good. I feel like there's going to be a game where it's going to be, we're finally moving to Javonte Williams. I just think that it's tough to time it. You can't play him every week trying to get to that game. Last week, he only played 25 snaps. He was 8 for 61, explosive, good. He's 5,000. I can't get there with the split carries, but I acknowledge that I just might be a week late at some point, and people will keep playing him. You're probably going to hit that big game at some point, but I just think it's going to be too frustrating to do that until you get there.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. There's going to be a time for Javonte Williams. Unfortunately, I don't think it's now. It's too risky with these other plays. But yeah, like you said, I saw that stat about him, something about breaking the most tackles in football or something like that. Yeah, just with Melvin Gordon there and getting more work, I just can't do it. Like you said, maybe we'll be behind on him 1 week, but also maybe not. It might just be wait for when Melvin Gordon's going to be out.
Yeah, and you've got Darrell Williams at 4,900 right underneath him. We have Khalil Herbert underneath him at 4,600. You have Booker and Chuba right above him. It seems like there are weeks where maybe, the value in getting Javonte Williams makes sense, but I think there's too many guys that are definitely the guy this week around that same range. And I don't think I can get there.
Yep, I agree.
Let's talk about some mid-range receivers. We mentioned Robert Woods, he's 6,100. How do you feel about Cortland Sutton this week? 6,200 against Vegas. He had 11 targets last week, 7 for 120, 19 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. He's kind of the only guy left. Like Noah Fant is, there, but not really involved. KJ Hamler's out. Jerry Jeudy is still out. Do you have any interest in Sutton this week at 6,200? They have priced him up a little bit from kind of that lower range we were playing him at earlier.
Yeah, and I do have interest. They have priced him up a bit, but I do still have interest in Sutton. It's a really talented receiver, getting a lot of targets. He's got, he has a big ceiling too. So I know you don't like necessarily rostering Denver receivers, with Teddy Bridgewater. This is an all right spot for them. I guess I like the fact that he gets a lot of targets. He gets end zone targets. They throw him deep balls. He has big playability, and people will roster the other receivers in that range more. Keenan Allen above him, and guys like Robert Woods and Marquise Brown and other guys below him. I'm not saying Sutton won't be popular. He's a good play. People will play him, but. I'm on board with Sutton this week.
Yeah, I think you actually be pretty low rostered. I think that the point you mentioned, you got Keenan Allen and CeeDee Lamb right above them. You have Woods, Amari Cooper, Marquise, and Brandon Cooks right below him. I just think that I think people will go to other games in that situation. Last week was probably my best week of the season so far. A lot of that was to do to a $4,000 Darius Tony. Andrew and I talked a bunch about him. In that game last week, it was kind of a nice game stack opportunity with the Cowboys. He's priced up this week. He's up at 5,600. Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton may play, but he looked dynamic last week. 10 for 189 prior to getting ejected from the game. I understand that. But we might have a backup quarterback. Daniel Jones, I think, is probably going to play, but concussion protocol, it's always really close in getting that green light. We get Mike Glennon if he doesn't play. What do you do with Tony at the new 5,600 price tag this week?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear you say that you had a good week with Kadarius Tony, because I did too. I played him in cash and I played him everywhere, and I was surprised. I was surprised that more people didn't play him, I guess. Yeah, he was, somewhat popular at a 4K price tag, but he should have been more. So yeah, I'm glad we got our big Kadarius Tony game. For this game, I don't like that he's priced up, but with Galladay out, well, first of all, Daniel Jones has to play for me to have any interest in those Giants receivers.
100%, yeah.
But, with Galladay out, and I guess Shepard and Slayton seem trending towards playing, but if one of them happened to be out, then I just look for situations where the team just doesn't have anybody, so the usage and targets are going to be there.
And he looked dynamic. He looked dynamic last week. He looked really good. He passed the eye test big time.
He absolutely passed the eye test, which is that's what you want to see. I mean, he was making big plays. They were getting him the ball in all different ways, throwing him deep balls and throwing him short passes too. So I guess I will have more interest if one of Shepard or Slayton is also out alongside Galladay. Yeah. It's the price tag that's keeping me off him just a little. The price tag and the matchup. but I do still, I still like him. But we'll see.
And you've got Michael Pittman, who you mentioned a couple times, right below there at 5,500. He's got 39 targets last 4 weeks, 6+ catches in 4 straight games. I think it's kind of easy. Like, I just can kind of play with Pittman and go with all the targets there against Houston. You can go in that game too. One other name I want to throw out at you before we get to the really cheap options. 4,800. You're going to think I'm crazy, but 18 targets the last 2 weeks. He is $2,500 less than the other receiver in his on his team. Robbie Anderson is 4,800. Robbie Anderson is talented, has been an absolute bust this year. 4,800 against Minnesota. Minnesota's getting up some big plays to receivers. Do you think the uptick in targets, he hasn't really done a lot with them. Do you think the uptick in targets is a good sign that maybe we're going to get that big week here at some point, and maybe it's this week?
Yes, I do. I can get on board with Robbie Anderson. There's been a lot of I know the coaches have brought it up. He's brought it up. There's been a lot of public talk about trying to get him more involved. And that's a good sign. And we know Anderson's big playability. So one of these weeks he's going to go off. You're right. And you don't want to miss it. The fact that he's gotten 18 targets in the last 2 weeks is promising. $4,800 salary is promising. I have no problem going to Robbie Anderson this week.
My old partner chiming in the chat, Andrew Laird, said it only took a week for him to leave me, start talking about Robbie Anderson before DJ Moore. I did mention DJ Moore earlier, but it's just a huge price difference. So it's good to see you on Friday morning, Andrew, even though you're not actually talking to me. But what about cheap receivers? You mentioned Amon-Ra St. Brown. We mentioned McCole Hardman. I think that both going to be popular down here. If you're going to get really tricky, I mentioned a pivot away from Ricky Seals-Jones earlier. In that same game, Washington has a lot of banged up receivers. Diami Brown kind of practiced this week. We don't know if he's going to play. Cam Sims is out. Next to Terry McLaurin, last week we had DeAndre Carter. He's $3,000 minimum price. Obviously, we talked a ton about this game. DeAndre Carter played 58 snaps last week, had 8 targets, and was 4.52. He's a dynamic guy. He's a really good kick returner. I think he had a kick return for a touchdown against Atlanta the week before. For me, I think I can never say his name. Diami Brown has to sit for me to play him. But if DeAndre Carter is playing 55 60 snaps this week in this game, I think he makes a really interesting piece to this game. This game's going to be high scoring. Washington's going to be throwing the ball the whole second half. If you have something that's going to be out there on the field every play, I really like that at min price. And I think he's a really sneaky move away from Ricky Seals-Jones, getting the same offense, same action here. If we can get the same price, I really like going from Seals-Jones to Carter in kind of a big pool tournament.
Absolutely, yeah. And especially if this Diami Brown is out, like you said, he would have to be out. But if he's out there playing 58 snaps or whatever again, $3K, I'd consider him in the tournaments I'm playing, even more so than just the big field stuff. You can play him anywhere for that type of usage. But like you said, that's one where you got to check the actives at receiver for Washington. People have been trying to play Curtis Samuel the last 2 weeks. I mean, a lot of people have even played him in cash. People have been trying to play him in tournaments. I don't know if I could go there, but so one of these cheap Washington receivers, though, looks really good. Whichever one's going to play. So I guess we'll have to wait on that. But I'm on board with Carter if those guys are out. Absolutely, I think that's a good call.
I think Curtis Samuel is pretty safe to not play. It sounds like he's week to week, so I'm pretty good there. Cam Sims sounds week to week too. I think it's Diami Brown who is the kind of the key there. If he's going to play the 2, then I'm probably a little scared of Carter. But man, if he's out there every snap, min price, and if you could play him instead of Seals-Jones and get a little bit different, I do like that player. Are there any other 3,000 receivers you like this week? We mentioned St. Brown and Hardman a little above that range. We mentioned Carter at the bottom. I didn't like a ton of guys in the 3,000s, but curious if there's anybody that's really jumping out to you.
Yeah, in the 3,000 range, not at the moment. No, not unless we get some news. Like if one of Jefferson or Thielen would sit, I think you could look at KJ Osborne. There is one actually. If T.Y. Hilton doesn't play, And if you're going to use a Carson Wentz stack, I think you could go to Paris Campbell in bigger tournaments. Again, I don't love it, but like, these are 3K wide receivers.
Right.
And then just, I guess, a little higher, since we mentioned those guys in the 4K range, Hardman probably going to be popular, will be very popular if Tyreek's out. I mentioned St. Brown for 42. I don't mind Mooney for 43. I'm definitely worried about Fields just not being a very good passer, but like if you're going to play Devontae Adams, someone on Chicago, Allen Robinson's questionable too. Someone on Chicago is going to have to catch passes, and Mooney's looked pretty good with Fields so far. They throw him deep balls. He's had a couple big games already, so I don't mind that. But yeah, not a lot besides what we've talked about.
Yeah, like if you want to get boring, like Kendrick Bourne's been getting you some targets, and they play Dallas. If you think they're going to get behind and catch up, but I think I'm Carter at the bottom, or just move to St. Brown or Hardman at 4,200. The 3,000 is usually a range I like, but I don't like a lot in there this week. But
agreed.
Let's talk about tight ends. We kind of already hit most of it. We've got the Kelsey, the Andrews, the Ricky Seals-Jones, kind of the three tiers. Is there anybody else that you're really thinking strongly about? I think that if you at the top, if you want to get different, you go Darren Waller instead of Kelsey. If you want to get different in the middle, you go Dalton Schultz instead of Mark Andrews. What do you feel about kind of moving away from those three guys if you want to get a little different at tight end?
Okay, yeah. So the three that we've mentioned, Kelsey, Andrews, Seals-Jones, I think they're such good plays that the only way I'll go away from them is if the tight end fits in my stack, which it will. I think there's other guys you can play. Like we've mentioned some of these cheap guys. I like pairing Jared Cook with Herbert.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. You could make a case for any of these guys. I don't think I'm going to do it. Like Darren Waller will have next to no ownership this week. We know he can put up huge ceiling games. That's like a large field tournament type play when you have guys like Kelsey and Andrews above and below him who are going to be super popular.
Yep.
I don't know. Can you sell me on someone? I'm going to eat this chalk at tight end this week.
Yeah, I mean, the only guy to sell you on is if you're playing Dallas. I think the Dalton Schultz back-to-back week with 8 targets, 658 and a touchdown, and 6 for 79. They're really using their tight ends. It seems like Dak is really focusing on them, whereas the receivers are getting a little bit less attention than we thought. Schultz is a couple of back-to-back good games, but it's really hard to you have to do it in a tournament. It's really hard to play him just flat out over Mark Andrews. I mean, Andrews has. What was he? 11 for 147, 2 on 13 targets on the Monday night game. And there was a play in that Monday night game where Lamar had all the time in the world, and you could see in the red zone, he just looks for Andrews. He was waiting for Andrews to break open and finally hit him. He's just, when they get inside the 20, he's looking for 89 every time. And the key is that they're using on some deeper plays in the middle of the field too. They've expanded his usage, especially the last 3 weeks. He has, 38 targets the last 3 weeks. It has to be in a tournament just trying to be different and moving off the popular Andrews to Schultz. But that's what I would do. If I want to do the same thing, I'd go to Waller from Kelsey. I think that Hunter Henry, if you want to get different from Seals-Jones, he's 3,900 coming on lately, 19 targets last 3 weeks. He scored the last couple of weeks. He was 6 for 75 last week. It's pretty clear to me that Henry has elevated above Jonnu Smith on that usage chart for New England. But I don't know. You pay $900 more for it than you for Seals-Jones. It's tough there. So I think the 3 we talked about are just kind of they're so obvious this week, but those are the spots that I'd go. If I want to get a little different, it's Waller, it's Schultz, it's Hunter Henry.
I like your Dalton Schultz call. Also because the Cowboys have the 3rd highest implied total on the slate, and they're not going to be popular this week. They've been popular every single week, and now they're not going to be. So I think, I do like playing Dak with one of the receivers and Dalton Schultz in tournaments. That's a stack we didn't talk about, but now that the Cowboys passing game isn't going to be popular, that's when you jump on.
And their receivers aren't expensive. I mean, Lamb 65, Amari Cooper 6,000. We mentioned Schultz 4,900. You can play that pretty easily, and then get a couple expensive pieces in from other games, and really still have a piece of those really high scoring games, but be different with your stack. And I think it's a really interesting. You could even play a Dak stack and get either Devontae Adams in there or Austin Eckler and have pieces of those popular guys, but be different elsewhere and really kind of get where you need to be. I think the Dallas passing stack is a really interesting one this week.
Definitely.
Let's talk real quick about defense here at the end. I think people tend to forget about defenses, play whoever is cheap. But there are a couple of cheap defenses that I like, and I usually say like under 3,500. But what do you think about defense this week? I'd like to get your thoughts there before I let you know mine.
Okay. Well, I'm anxious to hear your thoughts because I can't find a defense under 3,500 that I actually want to play.
All right. I got two of them, but who are you thinking about playing?
In cash games, I'm just going all the way down and playing the Lions. Okay. I always pay down at defense, especially on DraftKings. It's just not worth trying to predict it, at least in cash games. In tournaments, that's a different story. It makes sense to pay up at defense sometimes to look for defenses who are going to score the most points. In cash games, don't worry about it. Play the cheapest defense that you're comfortable with. I think people, I've heard some people, I don't know, I can't even recommend this. I've heard people talking about like the Ravens, but like, no, I'll go down. I'm going to play the Lions in cash. But yeah, who are you looking at? I guess who's the defense that you actually want to play on this slate? Like I was scrolling all the way up. Like the first one that I'd be comfortable with is the Colts at 3,500.
Yeah, it's a weird week because I didn't usually like a couple jump out to me, and it was like, where do I go here? But the two that jumped out to me is like I think I'm going to play. The first one's at 3,200 is Dallas against New England. Dallas has multiple interceptions in every game. New England's thrown 5 picks the last 3 games. I think that Dallas is going to be leading this game. I'm not as big on New England as most people are. I think that Dallas is win this game by double digits, and I like that. Rookie quarterback in the second half, down points, having to throw the ball. Tampa Bay sacked New England 4 times a couple of weeks ago. I think you can get to the quarterback against New England too. So I think Dallas' defense is just really good. I know everybody's been talking about Trayvon Diggs and the interception every game, but I just think their defense overall is really going to get to the quarterback. I want pressures. I want a rookie quarterback. I want forced throws. I think you might get that in the second half of this game. So I like that. The other one I like, I really like Minnesota at 2,900 against Carolina. Minnesota has multiple sacks in the game in every week. They had seven to get sacks total in the last 2 weeks. I think we saw some old school Sam Darnold last week. They turned it over 4 times. They've been sacked 8 times the last 2 weeks, 11 times last week. So I think Minnesota is going to get to Darnold. And I think that, we saw a little bit of it last week. Darnold might force some balls. So if you give me sacks and you give me maybe some mistakes, I think we're going to get the floor of the sacks for sure. And we get 3 or 4 of them. I think Darnold may make a couple of mistakes. So I think under 3,000, Minnesota 2,900 is a play that you might hit a big play on, and you're going to get a floor of sacks, which I like.
Yeah. Okay. I think both those make sense. I really like the Dallas call. Yeah. Always love targeting rookie quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Always. And you're right. Dallas's defense has looked great this year. Obviously, Trayvon Diggs has looked amazing, but their line too has been really good. Yeah. So I like going to Dallas. I don't know. I have trouble really recommending anything else. I don't know.
Yeah, those are my two.
Browns at home. What about the Browns at home?
Yeah, I mean, if you think that the Kyler arm injury is a thing, and maybe he's a little worried. Yeah, I mean, they're 2,600. They're a good defense. They got smoked last week, so maybe they're a little chip on their shoulder. I don't love going against Kyler because he's so elusive. It's hard to sack him. But yeah, I think he gave up. I think they had 2 and 3 sacks the last couple of weeks. So it's one of those things that. Yeah, I think you're getting a good defense at a cheap price, so I could see it. I'd probably go up a little bit to Minnesota if I were going to do it, though. Yeah,
I guess the reason I brought it up is because we didn't talk about Kyler at all, but if he's not moving around in the pocket, he's a totally different quarterback, and he did not look very good last week. There's times when Kyler turns the ball over to. And I just mentioned Cleveland because they're just a good defense, and playing at home, you don't know about Murray's health. But and otherwise, Murray's been so good that he's not a guy I'm looking to play defenses against. But
And it's a little narrative street, but I always like a good defense after they just got smoked because I think they're like pissed off in practice all week. And you're right, Kyler did not ever. The Niners really played Kyler well last week, and they have not played him well in the past. Like he's usually run around pretty well. He hasn't really smoked him passing the ball, but he usually runs on pretty well. But he had that. They were like rubbing his arm on the sideline, and he's a guy that like if he gets a little dinged up, you mentioned earlier, he's a different quarterback. And last year with the shoulder, like he became a different quarterback in the second half. I don't think this injury is serious enough that that's an issue, but. I'd be a little bit worried about that. The only thing I really like in the Arizona game, I do like playing DeAndre Hopkins kind of by himself. We mentioned that in the 7,000s. I think he's workable there, but it's hard to get there with all the receivers we talked about. One question to chat before we get out of here. Someone asked if you'd play both Cleveland backs if they're both active on the same lineup.
I can't do that. No,
I can't either.
I just don't. It's almost impossible for both to have a ceiling game. Like we've seen it before, but if one of them was 4K, then sure, like maybe you could play two running backs on the same team, but with the salaries, no, because some other running back in that range is going to hit a ceiling, and it's very hard for both of them to score over 20. Like, yeah, I get it. You look at their game log and you see that they've both been doing well, but it's too much to ask.
I agree there. You can like squint and kind of see ways and get there, but I think that timing two running backs in the same back when we have a ceiling game, maybe you get that once all year. Like I just don't think it's a strategy that's going to work. At least not for me. You might hit that right game, but and they're playing Arizona this week. It's not like they're playing Houston or someone that like, oh my gosh, they're going to carry the ball 40 times between them. But playing against Arizona, I'm not doing it this week. But anybody else you want to mention? Anything else on your mind on this slate you want to mention before we jump out of here?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Just end with the most important thing for these NFL tournaments every week. Always remember that half of the chalk is going to fail. Half of these sure thing plays, these locks, smash plays, half of them always fail. And the winning tournament lineups always have players that aren't going to be popular. So take some chances.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean take all chances. I mean, you could play some of these. No. Obviously. Like some of them, Some of those chalk, you mentioned half's going to fail. On the flip side, half's going to hit. You just have to hit the right ones. But you're right. I think a mix of, I think sometimes people are like, oh, I need, 6 1% guys in my lineup. Like you don't need that. But yeah, you need to mix them out. You don't want all the chalk guys. You want a good mix. And I think people sometimes go too far extremes either way. I think you kind of meet in that middle. When I look at tournament winning lineups, like there's a lot of them that have Derrick Henry when he's popular, but they had a receiver that's 3%. They're like, oh, I see how that makes sense now. But I think it's important to know, you want to mix it. You don't need to go the craziest lineup of all time. Those don't work either because you're not going to hit 8 1% guys. But
I'll say one more thing about that. There's good chalk too, and if you're going to play chalk, or at least the ones you like, it's fine to be way over the field on them. Last week I played 100% of Alexander Madison. There's weeks that I play Henry or Javonte in 100% of my lineups. So if they're going to be popular and I really like them, just you can go all in on those guys. That's a way to beat the popularity.
Yeah, and the Madison point's really good. Like we kind of harp on here's all the things I like, but like that was a Sunday morning play. Like Dalvin Cook was ruled out Sunday morning at 8:15 Pacific time. They had an hour and a half to just lineups, but like there you've got to make sure that you look at all those lineups because there's one move like that, and Alexander Madison was, I think he was 6,200, whatever it was last week. Like it's an automatic play at that point. Like I just changed all my lineups and I put Madison in FanDuel and DraftKings. I was like, you know what? I'm just doing this. He's really good when he plays. Cook's not playing at all. Make sure you hit those news. Like you make sure you're okay getting off who you like to go to someone that's really obvious and then kind of adjust. But just a note that, make sure Sunday morning you're checking those inactives because the Cook one was a big one last week.
Definitely. And yeah, it ended up, Madison ended up being 70% in the $100 double up and only 30% in the $5 double up. So there's a 40% difference. So there's big edge in those smaller double ups on DraftKings.
Yeah, there are just people that, they set the lineup on Saturday night and they'll think about it again. And it's a big thing. So if you're putting a $100 double up, you probably aren't doing that as you notice from the stats. But you get someone that's 30% owned that should be 70% owned. That's a big edge right there. Cool.
Yep.
Well, thanks everybody for listening. Thanks everybody watching to the Rotowire Fantasy Football Podcast, the DFS version, sponsored by WinBet. I want to thank Ryan for jumping on with me. Hopefully he enjoyed it enough to jump back with me next week. Hopefully he's not going to run away after 1 week, but just joking, obviously. But thanks everybody for listening. We really appreciate that. Hope everybody has a good week 6. We'll be back at you with week 7. We're flying along the season. Thanks everybody for listening. Hope you have a great weekend. Take care.
Yeah. Thanks, Scott. Good luck, everybody.